restartpod little clip today. Anthropic has just shared that China has allegedly, Alibaba specifically in their accusation, has been kind of almost like black marketing Claude tokens. The nuance and I guess like the flavor of this for anyone who's technical or wants to understand the technical details. Um, these tokens are obviously serviced by API. You can get them on Claude Max plans, and in China, there's usually a ban on Western models. Like folks can't access Western models. Um, but there are apparently a number of accounts that will VPN, proxy, and then sell tokens on like what is effectively an LM black market. We actually dealt a little bit with this. I don't know how much you were aware of it, Damon, when at the time it was happening. I know I mentioned too, but I'd love to hear first reactions, like your thoughts on the state of what this implies generally.
Yeah, I mean, I've got several high level thoughts, but I'll put those on hold for just a moment. I mean, I think you're probably one of uh, hundreds of people in the world that's actually dealt with this firsthand. Like, and as you were saying, like, I was aware of it while it was happening at Scholar AI, but I wasn't obviously like in the code base like you were. So I'd actually just like to kick it back to you and just kind of set the table for the audience around what happened. Right? What were we kind of seeing via the API call, etc. Would just do a little bit of table setting there.
Yeah, so for the record, we were building a thing called Scholar AI. Like it was for finding like research papers and like find and like generating citations and academic writing. Um, and I was going through logs, like especially in like the earliest of days, like just trying to like monitor our usage, draw segmentation maps of our usage. Overall, great thing to be doing, very, very intellectualized. The thing I was hoping for was like product insight about like, oh, are users like mostly in math? Are they mostly in physics? Whatever it may be, right? So you could double down on that. What ended up happening, not like a majority, but a very significant population of our usage was folks in China sending like generate a picture of a panda. And like it was all written in Chinese, like it was all like completely non-academic requests. I didn't know that they were from China at the time. Like obviously they were in Chinese, like I translated them and they're all just like very generic LM usage requests. Um, it came down our pipe. The problem is that like the first thing to do was that like I had to end up checking is that we also had a lot of fraud from Chinese credit cards, like an intense amount of fraud. We offered like a trial thing where you could use it for like 5 hits, and like I'm sure that might have blasted like some user appearances, all that kind of stuff in a way that was unfriendly to us, right? Um, and you look at this whole like general market, and the more I dug into it, and like we had folks on our team who are like more connected to the China ecosystem, I was asking like, "Hey, like, do you understand like what this is about?" Um, and the general pattern is like in China, you're not allowed to use proper LLMs, like just period. And so like any way to like get these models off market will happen. There's apparently full like almost like secondary economies around. For example, I didn't know this, but to set up the Scholar API for people in China, there are people who would run that as a service because then that API would then be used for like diffusion of like an OpenAI model or whatever it may be, um, which is obviously like very, very gnarly. Anthropic to deal with this, they introduced like identity verification, or they seem to have been. I've been hit by any sort of like identity verification request or something. Um, but like to me, it's like a first signal of like, hey, all of a sudden, I mean, this has been known that like in an agentic economy, like blockchain is relevant, but we need some sort of like auth system that's way more robust than what we have now. It's just hard for me to mentally resolve that if the auth system needs to be like agreed upon by every participant. And China's state of technology and ID is different. The US has a different state of technology and ID. There's obviously geopolitics involved between how we want to provide these models to different countries, whatever it may be. Where does it go?
Yep. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. I mean, again, I think it's kind of fascinating because you have, again, you're probably a world of 100 or maybe even thousands of people that have lived this experience firsthand. So I think that was very interesting. Um, my thoughts are several fold. Number one, we know that distillation is a massive problem from these, and we know that that's in part how some of the open source world, especially the open source world that comes out of China, keeps up with state of the art frontier models. So I do fully anticipate Anthropic, not just for their own sake, but just the sake of these models being released, will continue to develop anti-distillation technology. There's only so much you can do. To your point, like the
Mm-hmm.
reports we were looking at, there's tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of bots or fake accounts that are either using these models because they can't have access to them otherwise in China, or they're using them specifically with the idea of building an open source mock or replica of these things. And so to me, that actually has been the primary reason why I've been so skeptical of open source, and frankly, why I think you've seen open source failures from Meta and other folks. If you're not resorting to these kind of nefarious, pretty shady activities, you just can't roll a competitive model. Um, at least not to a large degree. I mean, there probably are some evidences of otherwise, but it just doesn't happen at scale. And so that's number one. Number two, I actually think this is a little bit of a third window into why we're seeing these types of export controls on like the Mythos class Fable model from Anthropic. Like I think what happened in addition to the some of the jailbreaks that were flagged by Amazon and other folks are there was credible reports that foreign actors, specifically Chinese actors, had gotten their hands effectively on the model. And when they have their hands on the model, they're able to replicate it at least to some degree. And I think that kind of imposed some perceived threats, kind of at the kind of government and state levels. So that also tends to be pretty interesting to me. The third part of this, and I don't exactly know how to kind of prioritize this or slot it in. There is a non-zero chance that token usage might be inflated at these companies because of this. Meaning, like
Yeah,
if these bot farms are kind of hitting them for distillation, it does call into question how much of the token use that's happening in Anthropic or OpenAI or otherwise is real use versus distillation efforts. So there's
right,
part of me that also wonders how incentivized is Anthropic to stop distillation because it is revenue to them, even though
right.
it is distillation. So obviously they want to stop it, but at the same time they like revenue. So I'm not exactly sure how to, kind of categorize that third piece there.
Yeah, I mean, for whatever it's worth, even like Meta and Grok, like Grok as in like Elon's LM, both of them have had confirmed reports of like
Yes.
distillation from the
Yes.
bigger companies and more successful ones, where the moment you're in front, like you're just accepting that like other people will like quote unquote cheat to kind of like catch up. That's just true, right? And like cheat as far as like distillation is like an academic term, like it's a thing that people do to like improve the intelligence of a smaller model. That's a normal thing. But as far as like terms of service of this company selling this product, um, it's just hard for me to imagine. I think generally where we kind of talked about this, like the leader out in front, whoever that is at the time. A while ago, it was OpenAI. Now it's Anthropic. Like you kind of have to discover the problems as you go. And I think what I'm a little bit perceiving is that Anthropic's in front at a very very good time, like during what is the quote unquote perceived takeoff per se. Um, but they have kind of by virtue of their own, I guess, vernacular and like the sort of like tone that they set societally, like they are making the traps of what LLMs are kind of hard for themselves to get through, right? Like it's thornier for them, whereas I think a little bit more of like a what's the word, wonton approach that like OpenAI had. That's like we'll do everything and everything. I've had a little bit more immunity to like this sort of like government, geopolitical, like et cetera, sort of conversation. Um, it's not to say good or bad, just different. I think the way that this goes forward and resolves, I mean, between the Fable level myth, like models and this event happening, it will be weird, I think, to end up eventually seeing that like to use an LLM subscription, like you will need auth eventually. Like it's not surprising to see that like you might have to submit a picture of an ID or something similar, or have like bio digital authentication. There are a number of startups who are playing around this authentication space, but it kind of begs the question that like old, I mean like backing up consumer perspective, like to log into anything in the modern day is an absurd process. Like if you look at like what you fundamentally have to do to log into any like well secured system is like you have an email, you have a password, you have to get one-time password sent to your email, you have to go get then a phone number sent and then like make sure that's verified and then maybe you do a little fingerprint thing. Like it's almost ridiculous how much we have to do to like get identified for a system, especially when the stakes are quite high like this, where we're talking about like what people are kind of equivalently treating to almost like a compute redefining level system that people want ownership of. all of a sudden you're, I think, asking for a lot of questions where I don't know who the like hot startups are in this space, but I have to imagine they're having the time of their lives. Like it's just like a hot problem that is conceptually really hard to think about because your end user is not necessarily a human.
Yeah, I think we're still in the very early days of people figuring out what parts of the stack, if you want to call it that, they end up owning. Meaning,
Yeah.
like, you've got folks on the extreme saying, I'm going to make my own racks, I'm going to run my own local models, and therefore I don't have to worry about this auth issue because it's mine, I own it, I run it. I see lots of challenges there. Frankly, I don't think that's very realistic, but neither here nor there for this discussion. Other end of the extreme is I use only third-party services, therefore I just have
Right.
to log in every time I use it or whatever. To me, the natural solution to this is blockchain, as you alluded to in the beginning.
Mhm.
I just don't actually know how that comes to fruition. Like it feels to me like the problem is known, the solution is known in the abstract, but not the specifics. Yeah, and so to your point, it just kind of feel like there is a match that will inevitably occur there, but it's going to take somebody or some group of somebodies to figure out the finer details on how you actually make those two technologies compatible so that
Mhm.
you don't get this, like you said, constant frustration on the user perspective of having to jump through a bunch of hoops to log in. I will say though, fundamentally, the ideas of convenience and security are in opposition, right?
Yeah.
They are dichotic. They're incongruous, right? I mean, they just simply they don't coexist, and so I don't think you ever fully solve it. That said, you can certainly reduce the amount of current friction there is.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing that like I think going forward in the whole idea of like the agentic optimal world, like a user experience that's agent first, like you wouldn't have to auth into everything you do, right? Like it doesn't make sense that we have these ambient machines or these like background agents wherever, but they have constantly have to stop what they're doing because they need your permission to know who you are. So it does seem like there's probably like a pending set of conversations or I guess like tones to be set around like paradigms, ways to deliver a product experience that's happy, especially as we're seeing like agentic finance, which is obviously like very, very serious in regards to capturing who the right person is for a transaction when you're sending a wire. Well, I mean, most cases we're seeing this is kind of like sidebar, but like I saw an ad today for like agentic like social engineering training, like
Hmm,
protection against it rather, but like you can think about where like in most secure cases like the flaws with the person, not actually the machine.
hmm.
But now we're in a world where like getting fooled is like kind of part of the default experience. How do you set up auth or in identity or security in that sort of environment when it's still ultimately people who have to be high cognition and our machines are built to be lower cognition for us?
Yep. Yeah, I think there's I guess maybe a good place to leave this for later discussion is we've seen several startups in this like proof of human world where it's like prove you're human, therefore you do something. I think there's also a lane there, which is prove you're the verified agent. I mean,
Yeah.
like we all fully expect to have agents taking actions on our behalfs that we want to pre-approve and allow them to do that they don't need to come back to us with like ad hoc approval about. But similarly, in the same ways that we prove we're humans, they're going to need to somehow validate to the service provider, to whoever they're buying services from, that their human counterpart approve this
Yeah.
proactively. Um, and interestingly enough, we actually, before we even started recording, kind of spoke about one of these anecdotes as they're kind of popping up. So again, more to come on kind of all these fronts.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll leave it there. We'll catch you all later. Tomorrow it sounds like we're talking about GLP-1s and peptides after, I think, a long overdue point. So we'll catch you all then. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you tomorrow. Peace.